So the theme, excuse me, the theme of all that I do and the theme of our meetings and our gatherings on Sunday evening is always under the banner of wholeness. And wholeness really is, it is the nature of life and the art of living. And it's very interesting that when the art of living aligns with the nature of life, we get to experience living super naturally. It is about experiencing life at its best. We want to experience a life that is meaningful, that is rewarding, that is fulfilling. And that is what living should be about, is to live and experience our best life. So while our context is wholeness, our watchword is experience. We want to experience life at its best. When we think of wholeness, wholeness is when every dimension of our life is complete and aligned in harmony because every aspect of living is in order with nothing lacking. Think about that. Wholeness is when every dimension of our life is complete and aligned in harmony because every aspect of our living is in order and lacking nothing. When we can move closer and closer to that, and the closer we come to that type of alignment, the more extraordinary our life becomes. And we can truly get to determine the quality of our life. We get to create the reality that we experience in our life. It's not the circumstances of life that will do that, that determines that. We get to do that when we understand how we can walk and align in wholeness. Some people say to me, not in today's world. Well, I want to say, absolutely, in today's world, we can all live an aligned and a whole life where we can experience living super naturally. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about an extraordinary technology that supports optimal well being. Why I'm going to share this is because on the pathway to wholeness, this becomes an extraordinary tool to help bridge that pathway into living a whole life. It really is a very simple technology that's just an elegant pattern that refines how mind and body work in synergy. And by virtue of that, it unlocks potential that it's otherwise not as easy to tap into. So we're going to talk about those two things. So when it comes to experience in life, experience is what enriches life. It is what gives life meaning, it's what gives life value. Experience. It is what our experience of life is what shapes our character. It's what molds our mindsets. Now, what we need to recognize is the how we experience life. Experience in life is really determined by one of two fundamental states, and there is no middle ground. We either are experiencing life rooted and anchored in a state of being that is governed by love, or a state of being that is governed by fear. And it's rooted in these states, and there is no middle ground. How are you experiencing life today? Is it exciting? Do we go to bed at night looking forward to waking up the next morning to engage life with passion and purpose, with meaning and value, where we feel empowered, where life is a continuous and progressive growth, and we are achieving our dreams and our goals, and we are excited about the relationships and the encounters of life, where we overcome the challenges with exhilaration and with joy? Or are we going through life with that treadmill, that hamster wheel, daily routine existence, where every day is just the same old, and we're just plugging along, and we're just trying to make ends meet, and we're trying to get by, and we're trying to figure life out, and we're trying to make life work, and we're feeling like we're struggling and paddling upstream. You see, there's only one of two ways we can go in this life, and we have to step back, take a breath, examine it, examine ourselves, and recognize that when life is rooted and grounded in love, we live a very satisfying life. It's a life that is really fulfilling, a life of empowerment, a life of abundance, a life of prosperity. It's inevitable when life is rooted that way. And for all of us, our journey of life, it comes to a finish line one day. But we want to get to that finish line, and we want to be able to look back at life and say, I feel satisfied with the way I lived my life. It was meaningful. It was value, and what I was able to accomplish or what I was able to leave behind would benefit humanity or my family in some way. But it is true that most of us, according to statistics, we get to the finish line or we approach that finish line of life one day and we look back and we have regret because life was fraught with lack and limitation, striving and survival, not recognizing potential, not realizing purpose, and just trying to make life work. And I want us to recognize and realize throughout the presentation that it is based on there are only two fundamental states from which we can live. Why? Because there are only two natures to our being, as we'll see. But where we have come to today and where we will reach to in our journey ahead is going to be entirely based on the choices that we are going to make, the decisions we are going to make, the actions that we are going to take. Those choices that have brought us to where we are, we want that the journey ahead is going to be rewarding and fulfilling and meaningful. But we have to also bear in mind that we have to now root ourselves in one of two states, fundamental states of being that conditions our mind and our heart. It's either going to be love, it's either going to be fear. When it's love, we live a life where we feel free and where we thrive. It is where wholeness is. It is feeling secured in self love. It's honoring your life. It is affirmed in your self worth. It is being true to one's values, being sovereign to your belief and your purpose, being true to yourself. It is an authentic way of expressing your life when you're true to who you are. It's living with an assured awareness. You know what you want, you know where you're going, you feel guided, you feel certain, and life brings to you and brings into your experience all that you need. Life works for you, and it never works against you. And that is the truth of it. Or the other side of it is we can become entangled in the affairs of life, the busyness of life, caught up in the mundane routine of things where life is more fractured and we're insecure in our self-love and our self-worth, where we live based on the expectations of others, where we allow circumstances of life to determine the state of our being, where we conform to societal standards. And by virtue of that, we get into more pretensive ways of living where we are trying to fit in, to be accepted. And we get entangled with the uncertainties of life. And we end up on this routine existence of life trying to make it work. Most people live that way according to statistics. Very few people make it to that finish line and feel satisfied with the way they live. And so I want us to contemplate this psalm that says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days is not about counting the days that we may have left. It is teach us to be mindful. Let us be mindful. Let us be aware that life is limited. And a heart of wisdom is we need, because it is limited, we need to take on life with intention, with meaning, and with purpose by recognizing the value of life, by understanding who we are and the value of our own lives and learning to honor that. And that's one of the places that where we need to start our journey. And so we're looking at the theme of all that we do is about restoring our health and awakening our life. And by restoring our health, our life truly awakens because health is beyond how our body feels and functions. If we look at the definition from the World Health Organization, it says that health is a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. When we think of health, we must expand our thinking and our perspective beyond how our body is feeling and how it functions. That's just one aspect of it. Health is not what is absent, but what is present. And what is present is a state of being that is complete, physically, mentally, spiritually, and socially, and it's aligned in harmony, where life flows for us. And so we want to be able to restore that alignment, which will awaken our lives to live at a level of living that is truly extraordinary. When we lose our health, when we lose that alignment, life becomes a struggle. And this is how it is for the vast majority of us. But life was never meant to be an uphill struggle. Wholeness is what we're after. And it's that complete alignment, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, and I would even like to add financially. So when we look at these aspects and dimensions of our life, do we need to pay attention to alignment? Absolutely. Because when we look across the landscape on a global scale, human struggle is a pandemic. Everyone, the majority of the human population, we are in struggle. We're struggling to make life work. A struggle has become the normal framework of living for many. And it shows up with, in the first block, physical chronic lifestyle disease. 50 million people a year dying from chronic lifestyle disease. And that's one of the first fundamental markers that we're out of alignment. Is the rate, the escalating rate of chronic lifestyle disease, 74% of global deaths. And we think nothing of it, but it is a global pandemic. And when it comes to mental dysfunctions, Alzheimer's, dementia, senility, depression, now the World Health Organization is saying that cognitive decline is now the leading cause of disability worldwide. We are seeing increasing healthcare costs. People are lacking meaning and purpose and value in life more and more. People are struggling with even their sense of identity. In that first block, physical, mental, and spiritually, we are very fractured. And as a result of that, the social framework of life is becoming more and more fractured and more polarized. There is more fragmentation in our culture. There is more social tensions, there's geopolitical tensions, there's more issues in families and marriages and suicides among the young ones. In the social framework of life, we are seeing things are coming apart at the seams in the social framework, but we don't recognize that the social framework is shaking and shattering because personally, you and I, physically, mentally, and spiritually, we are unstable and we are fractured within ourselves. And that overflows to the economics of our life. Most of us today, across the globe, most people are living with financial struggles. The greater part of society, in modern societies, we're living paycheck to paycheck. More than 70% of modern households, they live with ongoing debt. And life is a financial struggle, which creates one of the biggest stresses in our lives. And finances creates one of the biggest issues within the social framework and within families. And so here we have a cycle that continues to perpetuate. Most of us are spending our time looking for opportunities and looking for ways economically. The third block, we need to have more money, we need to have more wherewithal because the very socio-economic framework in which we live and exist, without a sufficient money, money really determines a lot of the choices that we can make that can determine our standard of living and even our quality of living. And so we spend a lot of time and effort on the third block, understandably so. But what we don't understand is that that is misprioritized. We must begin at the beginning. It must start with me. It must start with you. It must start with our own personal well being. Because when we can bring our life into alignment, when our personal well being, physically, mentally, and spiritually, can become aligned, that is the solution to fixing our social framework around us. And it may just be in our homes, maybe in our workplace. But if each one of us will take personal responsibility for our own lives, the cycle could be broken by we start at the beginning and it flows over into our social framework, and our prosperity economically and otherwise becomes the overflow of that. That is something difficult to experience unless you are engaged in the process of it. And so this alignment formula is love for self. This is walking the pathway that's rooted in love. And being rooted in love begins with love for yourself, love for your life, honoring yourself and honoring your life. And if we were to do the research today and look at the statistics across the board, one of the greatest human deficiencies is lack of love for self. And many people, we go about and we think that we do, we want to, and we know we should love ourselves, but the way we engage life, our habits, and the way we live, our styles of living, says it tells a different story. But this is a cycle. It's a cycle of fractured living, is what I call it. And this is how modern people live today. And this cycle is what we call stressful living. And it's a cycle of struggles that obscures our potential to live our best. But we have the capacity, when we understand who we are and what we possess, we have the capacity to live far beyond, to truly live super naturally. But it doesn't start with trying to have more so that we could do more and be more. It starts by being more of who you truly are, being more of your true self, so that the social framework of your own sphere of life will improve, and that is going to overflow in ways where of economic prosperity. That is the formula and how it works. To get a better handle on that in terms of practical engagement, we must understand, have a sense of understanding of how it works. But health is when spirit, mind, and body are aligned in resonance. It's harmonious. It is one chord. It's not the three separate notes of a chord trying to play independently. It is the three notes of a musical chord playing together in harmony. That is what health is. When it is out of alignment, it's the three notes that make up a musical chord are trying to play and be plucked independently. And to get a sense of this, you have to understand that you, an existence of spiritual life, and that is our true and authentic state. That's a reality that we have to come to terms with, that we are beings of spirit, that our true essence of being is really not tangible. It cannot be seen, touched, or hooked up to a machine and be measured. Although aspects of our being can reflect, because who we truly are as a being of spirit is what animates this body and makes it move. But to understand that you, your mind, and your body is an understanding of a breaking it down of how one thing has three aspects of functions that create how we experience life, how we organize, how we create our own realities. But this resonance, this harmony, only happens when it flows in its natural creative order, which is you as a being of spirit. Your life, the qualities of your life flow through consciousness into what creates mind. And mind is the conduit between you and living. Mind is what orchestrates the experience, how we experience life. This is where it's being orchestrated. And mind, it comes from that intangible realm through the central nervous system into the body. And the body is the vessel through which experience is expressed as living. And so we are trying to have our living experience be elevated or expanded in whatever way, but we're trying to do it by trying to fix all that is around us, not understanding that how life is experienced, expressed, and the reality that is created around us really comes from inside out. We are the ones that are capable of creating the reality, the circumstances of our life. We don't need to change the circumstances. Hear what I'm saying to you, that circumstances adapt and mold and are shaped according to how life flows from us, how our mind orchestrates the experience, and how we express it through our words and actions, and we get a sense of how that works. Consciousness is what frames our reality. Perhaps that's something you should write down and reflect on. Consciousness is the framework of our reality. Consciousness is the core and the essence of our being. You are listening to me and you're aware of all that's happening right now because of consciousness. But consciousness is defined by unity and expansion. The nature of consciousness is unity and growth, expansion. It's infinite. And it flows through us and it's expressed through our life as love, peace, and joy. These are not just emotions or qualities of emotions, these are essences of our being. This is the nature of our being. The nature of who we are is love, peace, and joy. That is aligned with wholeness, which is the nature of existence. The entire universe and all creation, the very nature of existence is wholeness. And when we can learn to live in alignment with the very nature of existence, there is nothing that's impossible unto us. Nothing that's impossible. So life, our life as consciousness flows and consciousness unfolds into awareness, which is what gives rise to mind. Therefore, what we call mind, surrounded, or the essence of which is awareness, is an extension of consciousness. But mind orchestrates and determines the quality of our life according to the identity our mind serves. Mind is either going to serve our true essence or being, or mind is going to serve what we have been taught and what we have been learned by the social structure around us. Mind is either going to be oriented by the qualities of our true nature, love, peace, and joy, or mind is going to be calibrated, conditioned, and based on what we have learned from the world around us. So the quality of our life and how mind orchestrates that, it is entirely determined on which one we identify with. We could either identify our sense of self as a being of spirit that have deeper qualities and values, or we can identify with ourselves as our physical being, which is how we are all taught to identify with self. For us, when we think of me, when we think of I, when we think of my life, unconsciously, it's in the context of my physicality. That's how we think of ourselves, as a being that is physical. We don't have an existential and conceptual awareness of ourselves as a being of spirit, even though there are those among us that will attest and agree and acknowledge that we are beings of spirit, but we don't have a conceptual understanding of that. But we do see ourselves as physical beings. And so we have our sense of worth and value is based on our appearance, how we carry ourselves, how we look, how we dress, where we live, what we have, the jobs we do. Our whole sense of worth and value is based on that realm. So that when people don't look the way they prefer or can adorn themselves a particular way or live in a particular area or have a particular job or not able to achieve a particular, they feel less than, because that's where our sense of identity is. And that's where we need to shift, because our true sense of identity and our true power and potential and capacity is really on the true nature of our being, which is spiritual. When the mind is oriented by our true essence of being, when our mind is calibrated by that inner reality, we only see life through a lens that's based on love and wholeness. We only perceive life as a unified reality. That's difficult for the average person to conceptualize, because it's intangible. You cannot know it through knowledge. You can only know it through experience. When you look into the world of reality around you, when our mind is conditioned by our true essence of being, you have love for everything and everyone, and you don't see a distinction between people. And life works in such a way that it's a flow and never a fight. And everything always aligns for what you need, and there's never a lack. Whatever you need always becomes available. That's when our mind is oriented by our true essence of being, and that's where we want to return to. When our mind is oriented by our physicality and it's been conditioned by the five senses that lock us into the reality around us, when our mind is conditioned by the social framework of life, we see life in separation, and it's based on fear. These are the two roads. There are only two pathways, there are only two fundamental states that define how we will experience life. One is based on our physical and external nature, and one is based on our true essence of our being, which is spiritual. This is not about being religious in any way. This is just the reality of how we are divinely designed to function, and the capacity that we have to live way beyond what we think. So the whole thing is, we want to get our mind is the bridge. This is the conduit. This is what's navigating the journey. This is what's orchestrating how we will experience it. It's all happening in this dimension, which unfolds from our essence of being. Here is either going to be conditioned by the qualities that come from outside or the qualities that come from inside. And so our whole goal is, As we look at alignment, restoring alignment means setting the mind in its right order. To do that, we have to understand that the language of the mind are thoughts. And thoughts are the seeds that determine our experience, and it shapes, and those our thoughts mature into that reality. The quality of our thoughts, and therefore the quality of our reality, is determined by the source of our thoughts. Our thoughts will either arise from flowing inwardly based on the qualities of our true nature, or our thoughts will arise from how our mind has been conditioned by the outside. But the thoughts will arise. We have about 70,000 thoughts a day, 90% of which are repetitive thoughts, and most of which is happening unconsciously. Thoughts will just arise in our mind, but it's either going to be based on wholeness or separation, based on where our mind is oriented. Thoughts, once thoughts arise, they take root in the soil of awareness and are fertilized by our perception. Perception is just the lens through which we look through and interpret reality. And that perception is shaped by mindsets, how our mind is set. And our mind is going to be set based on values, beliefs, and the mental conditioning. Either that came from outside or it streams from inside. Inside is based on truth, outside is based on illusion. So, based on how our mind has been set, or what has shaped and set our minds, creates the lens, which is perception, by which we interpret the reality around us. So thoughts arise, they take root in awareness, and the thoughts expand or extend into our emotions. And that is the fruit of experience. Thoughts, the energy of thoughts are emotions. Emotions are the amplified energy of our thoughts. And emotions is what gives us experience. Now, experience could be wonderful and blissful, or your experience could be miserable. What the experience of life is going to be is based on how we interpreted our thinking. All that comes into our mind, how we are interpreting it based on how we are understanding it and perceiving it based on how our minds have been set, determines what that is going to be. Now, the emotions, that's the language of the body. Thoughts, the language of the mind. Emotions, the language of the body. But the emotions, what we feel about what we think, is what creates that alignment between our mind and our body. You see, because we are naturally beings of spirit, we don't need to know how to activate or how to express the qualities of our spiritual nature. We need to clear this, we need to have this clear so that this will just flow through. The light of spirit will just flow through. But the problem is that right here at the bridge, there's a lot of cloudiness. It's been conditioned in a way that awareness becomes corrupted by the outside, so to speak. So, but emotions, that's the language of the body, and it reveals the alignment, how aligned mind and body are. And we'll understand that even further in a minute. But emotions define our state of being. Health is a state of being. Wholeness is a state of being. But our emotions, which is the extension of our thoughts or the energy of our thoughts, or what gives power to our thoughts. Those emotions is what guide and attract everything into our lives. It shapes every aspect of our reality. Our emotions or our feelings, this is the critical point where choices and decisions are made and where actions follow. We will choose according to what we feel and how we feel. We will act, we will speak, we will engage life. And life is going to work for us or not work for us based on the choices and the decisions we're making, the actions we're taking, based on how we have, based on the emotions and how we feel about how we are interpreting the reality around us. When we can get a handle on this, we will begin to reshape our lives on every level. And so we are meant to grow fruitfully and thrive abundantly. Wholeness is our natural state. We are meant to be physically strong, mentally clear, emotionally stable, spiritually aligned, socially connected, and financially empowered. Every aspect of our life should have no lack. But to do that, to truly experience what we call the wholeness of health, we have to have sovereignty, which is personal authority over our well being in every dimension. And the good thing about this is that because it is whole, because everything is inseparably interconnected, we don't have to know how to fix all the areas of our life. When we start from the right place and we start the process of cultivating that alignment, everything begins to align. You see, when one dimension of our life is out of order, it creates ripples of imbalance throughout. But when one starts to come back in order, starting at the right point, everything else starts falling back in order. It's like a six-spoke wheel. That if one spoke goes out of balance, the whole wheel starts to wobble. And so once you bring that one spoke that's out, so it's not about trying to get the financial side of our lives right and excluding the spiritual dimensions or trying to get our mentality right and our attitudes right, but we don't pay attention to our physicality and how we honor and treat our bodies. It must all be aligned, and so we must have sovereignty over every dimension of our life. That sovereignty is rooted in our awakened identity. Unless we come to recognize who we truly are, we would not really know the potential we have, because our potential, what we are capable of doing, is directly connected to who we are. So we have to know the true essence of our being to recognize the potential. And potential is what reveals purpose, something that eludes most people. And this is our identity is how it determines how we value our lives. And most of us, we lack that love for self, and we don't value and honor our lives as we ought to, even though we know we should, because we are in this mental struggle, this struggle in our minds because of mindsets. That's what we are struggling with. Everyone wants to live better. Everyone wants to have a right attitude. Everyone wants to be disciplined. We want to be committed. We want to not fall into procrastination. We want to be able to have vision. We all want these things, but we all find them elusive in our lives. And because the order of life is not flowing as it should. But we are all meant to live and reign in life prosperous. But to reign in life, we need to have a perspective. We need to be able to look through a lens, look at reality through a lens that is shaped by a mindset that's rooted in self-love, truth, and divine order. And it simply means that how we think and everything that we do must align. See, for there to be alignment, there must be a single thread that runs through all six spokes. And that single thread is just simply truth. And we can define truth in many ways, but truth is simply any principle, any way that fosters and supports harmony, alignment, peace, collaboration, unity, anything that supports any type of separation and disunity does not align with truth. That's a simple way of looking at it. And so the loss of health, which is losing the flow of that inner power from mind to body because it blocks our true nature from flowing through. Mind is that central axis of how living is expressed and how life is experienced. And it is the gateway to all possibilities. If we can believe, Jesus taught, nothing is impossible. It's a state of mind, but that level of belief to where nothing is impossible is that place of alignment. When the flow is free and clear and not resisted or have friction. You see, when our mental state is peaceful, which is the vibration of wholeness, peace is when fractured living disintegrates and wholeness emerges. Peace is the natural state of that. But when our mental state is peaceful, mind and body maintain their natural synergy, and it releases our creative potential to live optimally. Why? Because now we can flow in the fullness of our spiritual nature. We can flow and express our potential because there's no synergy between mind and body. And so we can now flow without resistance. But when thought patterns and emotional responses are out of sync with peace, that an inner resistance, because there's a contradiction within ourselves between who we are trying to be expressed, love, in conflict with our conditioned sense of self, which is our ego-centered nature, our identity rooted in our physical self and our true nature, and there is this contradiction or conflict inwardly in that. It's an inner dissonance instead of a resonance. And it's simply because of a loss of spiritual awareness. And that's what we want to recover. But because of that, it creates a separation. This duality, this conflict of duality, it creates a separation. There's a separation of perception between our inner nature, which is peace and calm, and life's outer uncertainties, which is always turbulent and restless. And so we have what is called this double-minded state. There's this conflict that's going on inside of us. This is the root of what is called stress. The experts in psychology tells us that stress, or what you can call cognitive dissonance, where there's a lack of inner resonance and quality between how we think and feel, that's stress. But we don't think of stress in this way, even though this is where stress is rooted. We think of stress as being what's happening around us. And why is this important? Because this is the root that spirals everything down and brings our life out of order and out of balance, reflecting as sickness and disease of all types. It is the root of all lifestyle disease, not some, all lifestyle disease. And so when we have this identity crisis that leads to this fractured state and this unstable way of thinking and being, it leads to an unstable way of living that we could identify within ourselves, but we don't interpret it as being part of what stress is. But this is the root of stress, which is what pulls our lives apart. And this fractured way expresses itself in these types of examples, which are only a few. It is when privately we experience life one way, when we are home and behind closed doors and nobody's around. Publicly, we pretend life is another way. We project self-confidence and we carry ourselves a particular way, but at the same time, inwardly, we are disturbed by what people think about us. It's a false sense of being. We judge others for their improper behaviors, but we try to justify our own and excuse our own. We proclaim to value truth, but we're not honest with ourselves. And sometimes not honest with others. And we desire to be healthy, and we say health is our most valuable asset, and we want to experience a healthy life, but yet we willfully engage in habits that we know that's not in our best interest. We resolve to change. We make New Year's resolutions. We determine and we have intentions to improve our lives and whatever. We start, we fall away, but we do things differently. We don't follow through. It's because of this unstable way of living. We think one way, we do something else. We feel one way, we say something else. This is that fracture. This is what the root of what stress is. And as long as we live this way, this is a fractured way. We want to come back to how we think, how we feel, what we say, and what we do is one and the same. There is no distinction or disparity among them. How we think, how we feel, what we say, what we do is one and the same. Stress doesn't arise from external circumstances. It's not the bills that are piling up. It's not the lack of money in the bank. It is not the traffic that you have to deal with. It's not the job that you're dealing with. It's not what happening around you that you say life is stressful. It is how these things are being interpreted and how we react to them, shaped by that internal framework of our mindset. And it arises from not understanding who we are and living contrary in a way that we dishonor ourselves. That might be hard to hear, but that is really rubber meets the road. We have to learn to honor our lives. And if we come to recognize who we truly are, we can't help but to begin to honor ourselves and grow in love for ourselves. And when that happens, you'll start to see what starts shifting. Simple, but not necessarily easy because it's a learning and an unlearning that has to happen. But because of this fractured way that is defined in what we call stressful living, it is creating problems from our physical well being, our mental well being, our social well being, and even our financial well being. If we want to bring our life and we want to work towards and cultivating a life of wholeness where we can now experience an extraordinary life, where we can live super naturally, we need to get a handle on this. The statistics from all across the globe tell us that 60 to 80% of people in modern societies, we live in a chronic and recurrent state of stress. 90% of doctor visits, stress related. 75 to 90% of all human illness, stress related. 90% of diseases caused by stress, thoughts, and beliefs. That's the science of epigenetics. Chronic stress increases the odds of developing Alzheimer's by 145%. And that's not just Alzheimer's. So we need to get a handle on this. And stress is not about taking pills for stress and anxiety, which is no, we're now treating stress like it's another lifestyle disease. Because we're not understanding or we're not looking inwardly, we're looking outwardly because we identify with self as being physical, when in truth, we are more powerful, more potent, and larger than that. But when this is the way that life is unfolding, when it comes from mind into body through the central nervous system, which is how we express what we experience from the mind is what orchestrates the experience. The body, it feeds down through the central nervous system, and the body is what's going to begin to experience that state of mind. And it's what we're going to express into our living. But when you think about the rampant lifestyle diseases that's sweeping this planet, this is the root of it right here. The brain and the nervous system is what makes up the central nervous system, and it extends into the autonomic nervous system. And it is controlled by two branches. It extends into two branches. One is called the sympathetic nervous system, and this deals with stress response. Anytime we're feeling stressed, there's anxiety, there's frustration, there's resentment, there's guilt, there's shame, there's anger, there's negative vibrations, negative frequencies. All stress is just negative vibrations, negative frequencies. Where is it coming from? This is emotions. Where are the emotions coming from? How we are interpreting the thoughts in our minds, how we are interpreting how we perceive reality. Why are we interpreting that way? Well, it's based on how our mind is set. Why is our mind set that way? Well, it depends on where it's oriented. It's either oriented based on and calibrated by physical senses, or it's calibrated by spiritual senses. We're just not familiar with the latter. And so when there is always stress, when there is this ongoing chronic state of stress, all the science literature tells us it's the seed bed from which all chronic lifestyle disease grow. It just happens over time. It's just a cycle that's gradually disorganizing. It is bringing everything out of coordination, and it is making things deficient, and it's chronic and it's ongoing. Now, we're supposed to have this stress response in times of emergency when we have to quickly respond to something, but it's supposed to settle down. But we live in this state of survival. It's called a survival mechanism, survival mode. We are constantly living in survival mode. Life is always in a stress mode. So it's not only bringing our bodies down in terms of its functionality and capacity, it is affecting our minds and it's affecting our capacity to live effectively. The second branch is the parasympathetic nervous system, and that deals with healing and recovery. This one becomes dominant when there is peace, harmony, coherence, inner alignment, when there is authenticity in the way we live, when how we think, how we feel, how we speak, how we act is one and the same. When there is that alignment, when there's order, this is dominant. And when this is dominant, as the medical literature tells us, this is where what we call spontaneous healing or spontaneous remission comes in, whereas there are people with chronic conditions, there are people with life-threatening and terminal illnesses that just recover even without medical intervention, because that's the power and the capacity that we possess when life flows from the inside out. And when life flows from the inside out, the parasympathetic system is what's dominant. The central nervous system is regulated by our state of mind. And our state of mind is measured in brainwave activity. When we measure brainwaves, and this is where we're getting down to the real meat now. When we measure brainwaves, we are looking at the reflection of our state of mind, as neurology teaches us. But when brain waves reflect inner harmony, which is positive frequencies, the central nervous system maintains its natural balance, which is this, the parasympathetic dominance. Everything functions in harmony, everything is coordinated, our immune system is optimal, body's response to heal and repair and recover is optimal, beyond the natural. But when our brainwaves reflect inner dissonance, when there's that inner conflict, when there are negative frequencies, the central nervous system shifts into survival mode, and that starts a cycle going down. So the solution is that we have to reconstruct the wholeness of our being, which is our natural state of being. However, it is difficult to regain this wholeness of being without regaining that spiritual awareness, that sense of our true essence of being. And we can't do that when our bodies are enslaved to its habits. When we are enslaved to the disorder of unhealthy habits, we're not going to be able to do it. So we have to take sovereignty. We can't over our physical well-being while we are at the same time learning the new thoughts. We are now practicing new habits. When we start to gain governance over our physical well-being, we start shifting our emotional response naturally. There's going to be more mental clarity just by engaging the discipline to do it. But what gives us the strength and capacity for discipline, for consistency along the journey of cultivating wholeness, is to start to engage practices of spiritual awareness. It's all a process of inner and outer work at the same time. And it brings our lives back into more social harmony, which is one of our first places we begin to see the fruits of it. We start to feel different about our interactions with people just from simply taking charge of how we may honor our bodies, looking at what we feed our minds, and so on. And it's a process, and we go through this in some of our workshops. And you're free to join our workshops. Our workshops are free, and we go through a process of how we can unfold this. But it's just a state of being of who we really are, which aligns with what we believe, how we live, and it all has to be one and the same. That's alignment. But once we do that, alignment creates a state of mind that is in harmony. It keeps our brain waves synchronized in coherence. It resets the central nervous system into its optimal function. The body works better, the mind is clearer, and our capacity to cultivate correct habits and correct thinking becomes more accessible. And that's where this technology comes in. This technology is so elegant. It contains no medicine, no ingredients, no substances. It adds absolutely nothing to the body. It's simply a pattern. Now, when that pattern touches the skin, it sends a gentle signal to the brain to bring its order and balance back into harmony. And I'll show you how it works. It was discovered by this gentleman. His name is Jay Dhaliwal. And after almost 2 decades of research and development in neuroscience, he discovered something. He was trying to find a solution for his mother's multiple sclerosis and came upon this discovery based on Nobel Prize science that led him to this, what he's calling Super Patch. The name of his company is the Super Patch Company. He created a patch that all it has on it is just a tactile pattern. And when that pattern touches the skin, different patterns will create different stimuli on the skin and create different response. So let me show you, I'm going to show you a real test with a brain scan, which he does, and then I'm going to just explain simply how it is able to work that way, and then we'll come down to a close. So this is a real brain scan that he's done demonstrating one of the patches.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO and founder of Vox Life and the creator of Vox Life HPT. Today, I want to talk to you about our Harmony Neuro Patch. And what this product does is actually stimulates receptors on our skin, sending a neurosignal to our brain to help it reach homeostasis. This is the only product in the world that relies on the neurohaptic system that every single one of us has to optimize our neurology and optimize our health. Today, with the help of Dr. Mark DeBrinket, our VP of Clinical Strategy, we're going to be using an FDA-cleared 19-channel EEG headset, as well as FDA-cleared software to visualize, record, and show the impact that our technology has on our neurology and our brains to help it reach optimal performance. What we want to show today is how the Harmony Neuro Patch helps that dysregulated yellow, blue, and red colors in the brain maps transform into that healthy green homeostasis neurology that is the foundation of health and wellness. So what we're looking at right now is a neurological QEEG output of Mike's limbic system. The 19 channels are reading over 60,000 brainwaves a second and generating an output of neurofunction and brainwaves. What we want to see now is where that suboptimal red and yellow colors are. We want to see them turning as much as possible to a healthy green with the application of our HPT patch. So we've applied the patch now to Mike's arm, and within 10 seconds, you're seeing that predominant yellow and red become predominantly green. Just for clarification, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing in the world that has this output at this rate of speed without drugs, without chemicals, without electricity. That's the power of Vox HPT. So when we see a healthy green neurology, what we're looking at is a brain and a mind in homeostasis. It is operating in its optimal function. And this is so important. And this is why it's so important. So Vox Life HPT, as we demonstrated with our neuro patch, helps the central nervous system reach homeostasis in our neurology. And the reason this is so important for overall wellness and health is that neurology is the top of the pyramid of our physiological health and wellness paradigm. First is neurology at the very top, then there's chemistry, then there's biology, then there's physics and mechanics. Neurology will have an impact all the way through our entire physiology. Healthy neurology, healthy body, better wellness.
So the technology is based on Nobel Prize research that goes way back, starting in the 1930s, where it was discovered that every cell in the human body transmits and receives electromagnetic frequencies. So every cell in the body has that capacity. Then later on in the early 2000s, other Nobel Prize science revealed that when things touch the skin, we know that something is touching us because a signal goes to the brain. But beyond that, they discovered that the sensory neurons in the skin, inside of those sensory neurons, there's something called ion channels that is able to detect the vibration of what it is touching the skin. So what was discovered is that, which is what the super patch is based on, is how our brain waves, which is a reflection of our state of mind, how those can be influenced by the different signals that come from our skin to our brain. And what you see here, which are the 5 levels of brainwave activity that neuroscience know of today. Of course, they're beginning to expand beyond that. The super patches, they're not doing anything to any organ, any system, or the chemistry of our body. They're just bringing our brain waves back into their optimal state of balance. Now, what they recognize is that, in fact, let me just show it to you this way. To understand it is almost like understanding a QR code, which most of us don't understand how it works. Well, we will look at the QR code and we will see that it has a various patterns on the code. We don't know what it's telling us, but if we point a camera at a QR code, it will take that visual pattern and it would unlock it it'll take that digital, turn it into a digital signal, and it reveals the information that's locked up inside that pattern. In a very similar way, super patches is similar. They have different patterns on the patch. What they discovered is that there are specialized ionic receptors in the skin that detect the vibration of patterns. And depending on the pattern, it sends a corresponding signal to the brain, which the brain interprets. And it influences the brain waves to be more coherent. What Superpatch has discovered, which is proprietary to them after 15 or 17 years of research, is that various patterns will send various signals to bring the areas of our brain that's out of balance or miscoordinated based on brain waves and bring the brain waves back into their natural balance. And when the brain waves go into natural balance, resembling a state of mind that is orderly, then the brain functions more orderly, and the brain, which controls all aspects of the body begins to function more optimally. Never before has there been drug-free wellness, where you can improve mental and physical function without adding anything to the body, just by tapping in to the regenerative intelligence that built and runs the body continuously, tapping into that and just organizing it to be in its optimal balance, which then brings the physical and mental function to their optimal balance. It's called vibrotactile technology, and it is peer-reviewed and published science today, and it's listed in many prestigious journals like the International Journal of Family Medicine and Healthcare. And in addition to that, the technology is beginning to gain more global recognition, and it's being presented at major medical symposiums, because nowhere has it been seen before where you can influence and enhance physical and mental function, bring mind and body into their natural harmony and balance without adding anything to the body. Just a simple pattern that sends a gentle signal and brings various aspects of your neural networks back into their natural and optimal state. To date, after 17 years of work, Superpatch has been able to discover 13 different patterns, which represents 13 different technologies that each pattern influences various areas of our neural networks and bring them into their optimal state of balance, where we can now experience greater levels of health, wellness, and performance. I particularly like the Peace Patch, which is for stress. When people are going through, and they work very quickly, they work in a matter of seconds. If you're feeling stressed and you're feeling anxious and you're not able to cope, and you were to apply the Peace Patch, within moments you can begin to start to feel a shift in your calm as your nervous system shifts back more to parasympathetic dominance. And sleep, I think this is one of the, in my 25 years of clinical practice, I've never come across anything that helps us to be able to sleep at our REM level, which is where our brain and body repairs right at the cellular level. It cleans itself and repairs itself optimally when we get REM sleep. Most people don't get to sleep at that level for any length of time. And there's nothing in medicine or in supplements that can reset the circadian rhythms of the brain that naturally brings you back to that state. This is the first thing I've ever come across, and scientifically, nothing else has been proven to do that. The one that you saw demonstrated just now, which is the Liberty Patch, this is for mobility. It brings the limbic system of the brain, which is one of the emotional centers of the brain, in such a way that our strength, our balance, and stability improves in a matter of seconds by as much as 33%. You want to use drug-free pain. You want to get rid of pain without any type of substances, any type of toxic elements into your system, the Freedom Patch. Immune, when you use the Defend patch, the Defend upregulates the immune system in such a way that if you were dealing with a flu or some virus, you would get rid of it tremendously and significantly faster than taking any other kind of remedy for it. How fast? It will vary from one person to the other because it depends on what a person's overall status of health is. But I've seen the Defend patch get rid of people who were dealing and fighting the flu in hours and even in minutes. And that sounds impossible. The Victory patch is for performance, athletic performance. If you want to enhance your workout in the gym, if you're into athletics or you're into sports, and you want to increase your peak force, your strength, your endurance, and your stamina, and you want to do it quickly, when I say quickly, almost immediately, you put the Victory patch on, it streamlines that balance, and when you go to bench and do your reps, you'll feel the difference in your strength, you'll feel the difference in your power. Energy, clean energy, energy on demand, with alertness, without any type of chemicals at all. Enhancing your mood, you're feeling down, you need to have a more positive outlook, focus and concentration, healthy skin, increasing your metabolism by 25% at a resting rate, uh, dealing with addictions, the emotional centers of our brain that taps into why we're addicted to things or what makes us addicted. It helps to bring that into balance and control where we can overcome, whether it be food addictions, substance addictions, and even addictions to things like the screen, um, social media, things that we can't pull ourselves away from. And then there's one from Male Passion. The company has in research and development some phenomenal technologies that they're going to be releasing that is years ahead of what anything in the healthcare arena has today. This company is really doing something tremendous in this work in the health and wellness space. Unlike what is available anywhere in the world today, there's nothing that I know that work like this. But what I love about this is because it is tapping in to what reflects our state of mind and bringing that into harmony and balance, thereby enhancing physical and mental functions. I like it and I've gravitated to it and I've grown to love this technology because it makes accessing, getting our minds in resetting our minds, because to reset our mindset is not the simplest thing to do, but it helps to make that so much more accessible. But these are completely safe. They're non-invasive because it adds nothing to your body. There's no contraindications. There's no side effects. There's no allergic reactions. It doesn't matter if you have medical implants or what medication you're on, you're not going to have any issues with it. It is safe for children. You have a 2 or 3 year old that's dealing with some type of, let's say, a flu or a bug. It works safely, even for children. They're effective and they work almost immediately. They're tested, they're proven, they're affordable, they're FDA registered. And I know nothing else that has this type of impact. Where you want to see really even greater impact is when you combine them. Because the more we can get various neural networks in the brain working in harmony and balance, the greater that rhythm of flow, the greater the restlessness, the noise is going to subside, the more creativity, the more clarity, the more fluent in decision making, the better thing when we combine them and synchronize them together. And so to conclude, this is a way that can help us to unlock that potential within just simply through the power of touch. Tapping into what inherently is built into our body by divine design. It's an incredible technology that forms a bridge into this journey of wholeness and alignment. And so it supports what is called neuroplasticity. And that is a tremendous thing. Why? Neuroplasticity is how our brain is continuously remolding, reshaping, and rewiring itself. And when we start to use super patches, particularly in combination, and our brain, we start to bring that harmony and balance to our brainwave activity, the brain begins to rewire itself to this new balance. And so we are actually in training our brains and our minds to work more efficiently. Of course, that happens with consistent use over time. Our minds and our brains get to where it is not overnight. It happened over years, but over a few months of consistent use, the brain rewires itself. This is actually transformative. This is not about taking supplements and feeling better and supporting and controlling symptoms. This is actually transformative. And so the signals that it syncs with the regenerative intelligence that's naturally built into our body. And it enhances the balance between our minds and our bodies. It creates the optimal environment for making mindset shifts more natural and more accessible. And how I look at it is that super patches is like upgrading the body's operating system, which is the brain. The mind's operating system is the brain. It upgrades that. So we want to now install some new apps which will be relative to new practices of physical engagement, new habits of how we treat our bodies, new ways of thinking, new inputs we're going to start doing. We want to, these, you can call them transforming apps. We want to upload some new apps, but we need to upgrade the operating system so these new apps can function more efficiently. That's how you can look at what these patches are. And in the process of doing that, our body just feels better, functions better, and our minds work better. So super patches, they're supported in the field by this medical advisory board, which works along with the research and development team to make sure that we always compliant and that we always stay effective and that we always stay consistent with what we bring to the market. So my encouragement to you and my invitation to you is to enhance your well-being like you've never done before by getting aligned. Unlock that potential within you where we can live a life of wholeness, where we can live a life that is superior, where we can live a life where we can determine the quality, the standard, the effectiveness of our life. We want it to flow from the inside out. We need to renew the mind. But accessing that super patch makes it more accessible. This becomes our strategic support to living a better life. And so I invite you to join our global community. We have a Facebook page that has thousands and thousands of testimonies of people whose lives been impacted all over the world by this wearable self-care solution that helps us to live super naturally, and it's tailored by your body's own intelligence. Your body takes the signal that this sends to your brain and it's customized to what your body needs. This is the cleanest, most effective thing I've come across in terms of aligning functional capacity that we have. This does not replace nutrition. You need to nourish your bodies properly. You need to move your bodies. We need to have healthy habits. But the healthy habits that we find it difficult to engage the discipline, this will even help us to even get that more streamlined and in order. And so to become a member of community is very simple. There's a one-time cost of $40 to become a member that gives you access to wholesale pricing. Wholesale pricing now allows you to be able to make using this technology more affordable in the process of engaging in your life. For $175, this is US dollars, of course, you get what we call our Flex 4 starter pack, where you get to order 3 and they give you a free one. And that 175 includes this $40. And so take away this $40, then it's $135 to get 3 packs, and they will always give you a free one. And this is how you can use a combination to enhance your life. You can get to choose any 4 according to your lifestyle needs. For the course of this month, the company has an offer where to become a member is only $1. So this comes down to like 136 now. And that's one way you can begin to access this. And you're free to join our workshops, which we do twice a month, in terms of how to engage the process of cultivating our inner well-being. In addition to that, as a member, you also have an option to become an entrepreneur, where you get to be able to build your own globally scalable business using the economic model that Superpatch provides. And it's an excellent model of growth and development. And you can build on a global scale. And it is an opportunity. We all need an opportunity today, especially the way this world is changing with the advent of technology and AI, etc. We all need to be planning very consciously about how we're going to plan our financial futures. And we want to be able to have an option that can build sustainable and even generational wealth. That is something that's worth looking at. If that is something that you have an interest in, and if any of that resonates with you, you can look at joining our business meeting, which is tomorrow evening at 6:30, where we look at the business concept, we look at the potential of it, and that one is more interactive, where you can ask any questions. And so that is open to you as well. So with that, I am going to stop sharing the meeting. Let me just